I still remember the exact sound his knees made when they hit the kitchen floor. That hollow, wet thud, like a bag of rice dropped from the counter. My husband, Brandon, 6'2", 220 pounds of confidence and swagger, just folded. His phone was still in his hand, the screen cracked from where he'd squeezed it too hard. His mother, Karen, was on speakerphone, her voice shrill and rising. Brandon, what do you mean it's not? Brandon, answer me. He didn't answer her. He just sat there on the cold tile, knees bent under him, both hands gripping the sides of his head like he was trying to keep his skull from splitting open. His face had gone from its usual ruddy pink to the color of old paper. And I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, barefoot, holding a mug of chamomile tea, watching the man who had spent the last 6 months trying to steal my home collapse under the weight of his own scheme. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back. Back to when I still loved him. Back to when I thought we were building something real. My name is Ashley. 3 years ago, I was 31, working as a senior loan processor at a mid-sized mortgage company in Charlotte, North Carolina. Not glamorous, but steady. I understood paperwork. I understood fine print. I understood what happened when people didn't read before they signed. That last part, that's going to matter a lot in this story. I met Brandon at a friend's barbecue in Myers Park on a Saturday in June. He was grilling burgers, wearing a Panthers jersey, and telling some story about how he'd once talked his way out of a speeding ticket by convincing the officer they'd gone to the same high school. Everyone was laughing. He had that kind of energy. Big, loud, magnetic. The kind of man who walked into a room and rearranged the gravity. "You look like you need a burger," he said, catching me standing alone by the cooler. "I look like I need a reason to stay," I said back. He grinned. "Well, I'm Brandon. That's your reason." It was cheesy, it was ridiculous, and God help me, it worked. We dated for 8 months before he moved in. He was a regional sales manager for a flooring company. Decent money, company truck, the whole deal. He talked big about the future, about us buying a house together, about building equity instead of throwing money into a landlord's pocket. I liked that he thought that way. It matched how I thought. Here's the thing, though, and this is important. I already owned property. My grandmother, Nana Ruth, had passed away when I was 26 and left me her condo in uptown Charlotte. 2 bedrooms, 14th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. When she bought it in 2004, she paid $180,000. By the time Brandon and I started dating, it was appraised at $410,000. Paid off, free and clear, my name on the deed, my name only. I wasn't living in it when we met. I'd been renting it out through a property management company for $2,200 a month. That income was my safety net, my retirement cushion, my if everything goes wrong fund. I told Brandon about it on our 3rd date because I believed in transparency. He whistled low and said, "Smart woman. I like that." After he moved in, we rented a modest 3-bedroom house out in Huntersville, about 20 minutes north of the city. $1,500 a month, split down the middle. Fair, equal. That's how I wanted things. For the first year, it was good, really good. Brandon cooked dinner 3 nights a week. His chicken Alfredo was genuinely incredible. We adopted a dog, a goofy golden retriever mix named Biscuit. We'd walk him around the neighborhood every evening, waving at neighbors, talking about our days. On weekends, we'd hit up the farmers market on South Boulevard or drive out to Lake Norman and sit on the dock doing absolutely nothing. He proposed on a Tuesday. No fancy restaurant, no skywriting. Just the 2 of us on the couch, Biscuit between us, a ring box balanced on the dog's collar. "I know this isn't a movie moment," he said, his voice cracking just slightly, "but you're my favorite person, and I don't want to waste another day not being your husband." I said yes before he finished the sentence. We got married at the courthouse 3 months later. Small ceremony, 12 guests. His mother, Karen, flew in from Tucson. She wore a cream-colored dress that was close enough to white that my maid of honor, Jess, whispered, "Is she serious right now?" I let it go. I was happy. I was so unbelievably happy. The first sign, the real first sign, wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday evening about 4 months after the wedding. I was at the kitchen table paying bills on my laptop, and Brandon walked in from the garage, tossing his keys on the counter. "Hey, so my mom called today," he said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Yeah? How's she doing?" "Good. She's thinking about moving out here, actually. Says Tucson's getting too hot and too expensive." I looked up. "Moving to Charlotte?" "Yeah, she's been looking at places online, but, everything's insane right now. She was asking if maybe, and this is just her talking, not me, if maybe she could stay with us for a bit while she gets settled." I took a breath. "For how long?" "Couple months, 3, tops." I didn't love the idea, but I understood it. Karen was 63, recently widowed. Brandon's dad, Rick, had died of a heart attack 2 years before we met. She was alone out there. "Okay," I said. "A couple months. We can make the guest room work." Brandon kissed my forehead. "You're the best. Seriously." Karen arrived 6 weeks later with 3 suitcases, a cat named Princess, and an opinion about everything. The guest room wasn't big enough. The water pressure was criminal. The neighborhood was too quiet. Feels like a horror movie. She rearranged my kitchen cabinets on her second day without asking. She told me my coffee was weak, my curtains were depressing, and that Brandon had always needed someone to take better care of him. I smiled through it. I told myself it was temporary. But here's where the texture of my daily life started to shift. Brandon changed when his mother was in the house. He became quieter around me and louder around her. He'd laugh at her jokes, even the mean ones, and go silent when I tried to bring up anything practical. Bills, schedules, the leaky faucet in the hall bathroom. "Can we talk about this later?" became his favorite sentence. One night, about 3 weeks into Karen's stay, I overheard them talking in the living room. I'd gone to bed early with a headache, but I came back out to grab water. They didn't hear me in the hallway. "She's sitting on a gold mine and doing nothing with it," Karen was saying. Her voice had that conspiratorial hush people use when they know they're saying something wrong. "Mom, stop," Brandon said. But he didn't sound firm. He sounded like he was performing firmness for an audience that wasn't there. "I'm serious, Brandon. That condo downtown, in this market, you're her husband. That should be both of yours. Community property." "North Carolina isn't a community property state, Mom. Ashley explained it." "Ashley explained it," Karen mimicked, her voice dripping with something I can only describe as contempt. "Of course she did. She's got you trained real nice, doesn't she? That condo was worth, what did you say, over $400,000? $410 at the last appraisal. And she's just collecting rent checks while you two live in this little rental? Brandon, honey, think about what that equity could do for your future, for our future." There was a pause, a long one. I stood in the hallway, my bare feet on the cold hardwood, my water glass forgotten. My heart was doing something strange, not racing exactly, but beating hard and slow, like a fist pounding on a door. "It's her grandmother's place," Brandon finally said. "She's not going to just put my name on it." "She wouldn't have to just put your name on it. There are ways. You talk to the right lawyer, you get the right paperwork drawn up, a quitclaim deed, a trust restructuring. There are options. You just have to be smart about it." "Mom, I'm just saying, you're too good to be renting at 34, and that woman is sitting on almost $500,000 in real estate that she inherited. She didn't earn it. She didn't work for it. It just fell in her lap." I set the glass down on the hallway table, very carefully so it wouldn't make a sound. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, not yet. From something colder. Recognition. That feeling you get when a puzzle piece clicks into place and you realize the picture isn't what you thought it was. I went back to bed. I didn't say anything to Brandon that night. I didn't say anything the next morning either, when he brought me coffee and kissed my cheek and said, "You feeling better, babe?" "Much better," I said, and smiled. But something had cracked, something small but structural, like a hairline fracture in a load-bearing wall. You can't see it from the outside. The house still looks fine, but the weight distribution has shifted, and if you know what to listen for, if you press your ear to the plaster, you can hear it. I started paying closer attention after that night, To the questions Brandon asked, to the way Karen looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching, to the little comments dropped like breadcrumbs over dinner. Ashley, have you ever thought about selling that condo? Market's so hot right now. Ashley, does your property manager take a big cut? Seems like a waste. Ashley, you know what would be smart? If you and Brandon set up a joint trust for the future, for when you have kids. Each one delivered casually, lightly, like it was just conversation. But I work in mortgages. I read contracts for a living. I know what it looks like when someone is building a case, one small question at a time, testing the walls for weak points. It was a Thursday evening, about 2 months into Karen's stay, which showed no signs of ending, when Brandon sat down next to me on the couch with his laptop open. Biscuit was asleep at our feet. Karen was in her room. The house was quiet. "Hey, can I show you something?" he asked. He turned the screen toward me. It was a website for a law firm I'd never heard of, Kessler and Brandt, specializing in estate planning and real property transfers. "My buddy at work recommended them," Brandon said. "I was thinking, now that we're married, maybe we should get our assets organized, set up a trust or something, just to protect ourselves." I looked at the screen. I looked at him. His expression was open, earnest, the same face he'd worn the night he proposed. But behind his eyes, something was calculating. I could see it now. I hadn't been able to before, but the hallway conversation had given me new lenses. "Protect ourselves from what?" I asked. He blinked. Just life. What if something happens to one of us? We should have everything in order. "My estate plan is already in order," I said, keeping my voice even. "The condo is in a revocable trust that Nana Ruth's attorney set up. I'm the sole beneficiary and trustee." Something flickered across his face. Irritation, maybe, or frustration. It was gone in half a second, replaced by that easy smile. "Right, but that was before we got married. Things change, Ash. We're a team now." I closed the laptop gently and set it on the coffee table. "We are a team," I said, "and I love being on your team. But the condo stays in my trust. That's not negotiable." The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. I counted. Then Brandon nodded, patted my knee, and said, "Okay, no pressure. Just thought I'd bring it up." He got up, grabbed a beer, and went to the garage. I heard the door to the backyard open and close. Through the kitchen window, I could see him standing on the patio, phone pressed to his ear, pacing. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew, the way you know rain is coming before the first drop falls. I knew he was calling Karen. I sat on that couch for a long time after that. Biscuit woke up and put his head in my lap, and I scratched behind his ears and stared at the blank TV screen and thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, the woman who believed that love and paperwork existed in separate worlds. That woman was gone now, and whatever was coming next, I was going to be ready for it. The weeks that followed that couch conversation moved with a strange underwater slowness. On the surface, nothing had changed. Brandon still kissed me goodbye every morning, still texted me, "thinking about you," at lunch, still pulled me close in bed at night. But I was awake now, awake in a way that made sleep feel like a luxury I could no longer afford. Karen's couple of months stretched into 3, then 4. Every time I brought up her timeline, Brandon deflected. "She's still looking at apartments, babe. The market's brutal right now." Or, "She found a place in Ballantyne, but the HOA fees were insane, like $600 a month." Or, my personal favorite, "She's my mom, Ash. What am I supposed to do? Put her on the street?" I stopped arguing about it, not because I'd accepted it, but because I was watching, collecting, doing what I do best, reading the fine print of a situation everyone else was skimming. It was mid-October when I noticed the first piece of mail, a thick envelope from Kessler and Brandt, the same law firm Brandon had shown me on his laptop, addressed to him, sitting on the kitchen counter. He snatched it up before I could get a good look, stuffing it into his work bag with a casual junk mail thrown over his shoulder. It wasn't junk mail. Junk mail doesn't come in linen weight envelopes with embossed letterheads. That night, after Brandon fell asleep, I did something I'd never done before in our relationship. I went through his bag. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the zipper, and my stomach was clenched into something tight and sour. I found the envelope tucked inside a folder with his sales reports. Inside were draft documents, a quitclaim deed transferring my uptown condo from my revocable trust to a new entity, a joint trust in both our names. There was also a draft power of attorney, broad and general, that would authorize Brandon to execute real property transactions on my behalf. The documents were unsigned, but they were prepared, ready, waiting. I read every word, twice. Then I photographed each page with my phone, slid everything back exactly as I'd found it, and went to the bathroom. I sat on the edge of the tub and pressed a cold washcloth to my face and breathed until the shaking stopped. He wasn't just thinking about taking my condo. He had a lawyer drafting the paperwork. The next morning, I called my friend Jess, the one who'd been my maid of honor, the one who'd side-eyed Karen's cream dress at my wedding. Jess was a paralegal at a family law firm in South End. I told her everything: the overheard conversation, the laptop, the documents in Brandon's bag. "Ashley," she said, and her voice had that particular flatness that meant she was furious. "You need to talk to an attorney. Not tomorrow, today." "I know." "Do you?" Because the woman I know would have already had a consultation scheduled. She was right. I'd been so focused on watching, on gathering, that I'd forgotten to act. I called a divorce attorney named Linda Huang that afternoon. She had a cancellation at 4. I left work early and sat in her office on the 22nd floor of a building on South Tryon, my hands folded in my lap, and laid out everything. Linda listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "The good news is that North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, not community property. Assets you owned before the marriage, especially inherited assets held in a separate trust, are generally classified as separate property." Generally? The risk is commingling. If you've used marital funds to maintain the condo, if you've deposited rent income into a joint account, if you've made any modifications to the trust that include your husband, any of that could give him an argument. My stomach dropped. The rent, the $2,200 a month from the property management company. It goes into my personal checking account, but I've transferred money from that account into our joint account for bills. Linda wrote something on her legal pad. "We need to untangle that immediately. Separate the streams. And Ashley, do not sign anything your husband or his attorney puts in front of you. Nothing. Not a birthday card if it has a notary line." I almost laughed. Almost. I drove home that evening with a plan forming in my mind, sharp-edged and clear. I would protect what was mine. I would document everything. And I would not let Brandon or Karen see me coming. But life, as it turns out, doesn't wait politely for your plans to solidify. I walked through the front door at 6:15 to find Brandon and Karen sitting at the dining room table with a bottle of wine open between them. They looked up when I came in, and something about their expressions, too bright, too welcoming, made every nerve in my body fire at once. "Hey, babe." Brandon stood up, pulling out a chair for me. "Sit down. We want to talk to you about something." I set my purse on the counter. Biscuit trotted over and pressed his nose into my hand. "What's going on?" Karen smiled. It was the warmest smile she'd ever given me, and that alone was terrifying. "Ashley, honey, sit, please." I sat. Brandon poured me a glass of wine I didn't touch. "So," Brandon began, rubbing the back of his neck the way he did when he was rehearsed, but pretending to be spontaneous. "Mom and I have been talking, and she actually found a really incredible financial advisor. Guy named Tom Whitfield, works with a firm out of Ballantyne. He specializes in real estate portfolios." "Okay," I said. "And he had this idea. Well, it's more of a strategy, really. What if, instead of just collecting rent on the condo, we leveraged the equity? Like, we could take out a HELOC, use it to put a down payment on a second property, and start actually building a portfolio, you and me, together. Karen leaned forward. It's really smart, Ashley. Tom showed us the numbers. With the equity in that condo, you could— You showed a financial advisor the details of my property? I said. My voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. Brandon blinked. I mean, just the basics. The appraised value, the rental income. How did you know the current appraised value? Silence. The kind of silence that has a shape, a weight. Karen reached for her wine glass. Brandon's eyes darted to his mother and back to me. You told me, he said, a while ago. I told you 410. That was 2 years ago. What number did you give Tom? Another silence. Longer this time. Then Karen, unable to help herself. 465. That's the current Zillow estimate. You've been tracking my property on Zillow, I said, not a question. Ashley, it's not like that, Brandon said quickly. We're married. Your assets are our future. I'm not trying to take anything. I'm trying to build something with you. I looked at him. Really looked. At the man I'd married in a courthouse with 12 guests and a heart full of hope. At his earnest face, his open hands, his rehearsed speech. And behind him, Karen, watching me with eyes that held no warmth at all, despite her smile. The condo is not collateral, I said. It's not a portfolio strategy. It is my inheritance from my grandmother, and it is mine. Ash, I'm going to bed. I stood up. Biscuit followed me. At the bedroom door, I turned back. And Karen, your 3 months were up 6 weeks ago. I closed the door. Through it, I heard Karen's voice, sharp and immediate. See? See what I told you? She doesn't care about this family. She only cares about herself. And Brandon's response, barely audible but clear enough. Just give me time, Mom. I'll handle it. Those 4 words, I'll handle it, kept me awake until 3 in the morning. I lay in the dark, Biscuit's warm body pressed against my legs, and stared at the ceiling and thought about what handling it might mean. I found out 11 days later. I came home from work to find a FedEx envelope on the kitchen counter addressed to me. Inside was a letter from Kessler and Brandt, the law firm, on that same heavy linen paper. It was addressed to both of us, Mr. and Mrs. Brandon Holloway, and it referenced an appointment scheduled for the following Tuesday to review and execute estate planning documents, including, but not limited to, trust amendments and powers of attorney. Brandon hadn't mentioned any appointment. The letter was addressed to both of us, but it had been opened before I got home. The envelope slit cleanly along the top. I called Linda Huang. She told me to go to the appointment. Show up, listen, don't sign a single thing, and bring your phone. North Carolina is a one-party consent state for recordings. Tuesday came. I wore a navy blazer and my grandmother's pearl earrings, and I walked into that law office with my spine straight and my phone recording in my purse. The attorney, a man named David Kessler, was polished and professional. Brandon sat beside me, his knee bouncing under the table. Karen was not there, but her fingerprints were on everything. Kessler laid out a stack of documents, trust amendments, a new power of attorney, a quitclaim deed. All of them, every single one, designed to fold my separate property into our joint marital estate and give Brandon signatory authority over my assets. These are fairly standard for married couples looking to consolidate, Kessler said smoothly. I picked up the power of attorney, read it line by line, while the room sat in uncomfortable silence. Then I set it down. No, I said. Brandon's knee stopped bouncing. Ash, can we at least discuss? No. I looked at Kessler. I have my own attorney. Any future communication about my trust or my property should go through Linda Huang. I slid Linda's card across the table. The drive home was silent. Brandon gripped the steering wheel with both hands, his jaw working. When we pulled into the driveway, he killed the engine, but didn't move. You embarrassed me in there, he said. You tried to get me to sign away my property. I was trying to protect us. You were trying to protect your mother's plan to get her hands on my condo. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise. His head snapped toward me. "What did you just say?" "I heard you, Brandon. In the living room, that night, weeks ago. I heard everything she said. Community property, quitclaim deeds. She didn't earn it. I heard all of it." The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked exactly like he would months later on that kitchen floor, pale, caught, crumbling. But this time, he recovered. His jaw tightened, his eyes hardened. "Fine," he said. "You want to keep score? Keep your condo. Keep your precious trust. But don't expect me to keep playing house in this rental like we're roommates." He got out of the car and slammed the door hard enough to make Biscuit bark inside the house. That night, he slept in Karen's room. I heard them talking until well past midnight, voices low and urgent. The next morning, Karen was gone. Her suitcases, her cat Princess, all of it vanished. Brandon told me she'd found an apartment in Ballantyne. For 3 weeks, things were calm, eerily calm. Brandon was polite, distant, and spent a lot of evenings working late. I wanted to believe the storm had passed. I wanted to believe that my confrontation in the car had been the turning point, that he'd finally understood. That was my false hope. And it shattered on a Wednesday afternoon when Linda Huang called me at work. "Ashley, I need you to sit down," she said. "I'm sitting." "Someone filed a deed transfer with the Mecklenburg County Register of Deeds yesterday, a quitclaim deed on your uptown condo, transferring it from your trust to Karen Holloway." The room around me went liquid. My desk, my computer screen, the framed photo of Biscuit next to my monitor, all of it warped and swam. I gripped the edge of my desk with both hands and heard myself say, "That's not possible." "It shouldn't be possible," Linda said, "but someone walked into a notary's office with documents purporting to transfer the property out of your trust. The quitclaim deed was filed electronically with the Register of Deeds yesterday morning at 9:47 a.m. "I didn't sign anything. I didn't authorize anything." "I know. That's why I'm calling you right now instead of sending an email. Ashley, this is fraud. Whoever executed that deed either forged your signature or used a power of attorney you didn't grant." My mind was racing, skipping like a stone across water. "The documents in Brandon's bag, the ones I photographed months ago. There was a power of attorney in that stack." "A general power of attorney?" "Broad and general, yes, authorizing him to execute real property transactions on my behalf." "Did you ever sign it?" "No, absolutely not." "Then someone forged your signature, or they used a different mechanism. Either way, we need to move fast. I'm filing an emergency motion to void the transfer first thing tomorrow. But Ashley, I need you to get copies of everything. The original trust documents, your ID, anything that proves you didn't authorize this. And do not confront Brandon tonight. Do you hear me? Do not tip him off." I said I understood. I hung up. I sat at my desk for 17 minutes without moving. I know it was 17 minutes because I watched the clock on my computer screen tick from 3:22 to 3:39, each minute landing like a drop of water on stone. Then I picked up my phone and called Jess. "Can I stay at your place tonight?" My voice came out thin, reedy, barely mine. "What happened?" "He transferred the condo to Karen." The silence on Jess's end lasted 3 full seconds. Then, "Get Biscuit. Get your documents. Come now." I left work without telling anyone. I drove home in a fog, packed a bag with shaking hands. Clothes, laptop, the fireproof lockbox where I kept Nana Ruth's trust documents, and my passport. Biscuit watched me with his head tilted, sensing something wrong. I clipped his leash on, loaded him into the car, and left. I didn't leave a note. I didn't text Brandon. I just drove. Jess lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Noda, above a tattoo parlor. She'd set up an air mattress in her living room by the time I arrived. Biscuit sniffed every corner of the apartment while Jess poured me a glass of wine I couldn't drink and sat beside me on the floor. "Walk me through it," she said. So I did. Every detail. The forged deed, the transfer to Karen, the power of attorney I never signed. Jess listened, with her jaw getting progressively tighter, her paralegal brain clicking through implications. They had to have a notary, she said. Someone notarized that signature, which means either Brandon found a notary willing to look the other way, or someone impersonated you at the signing. Who would impersonate me? Jess looked at me. Just looked. And the answer settled over me like a cold sheet. Karen, I whispered. She's roughly your age range from a distance. If she had your ID, or a copy of it, and a cooperative notary. Brandon had access to everything in our house, my filing cabinet, my documents. I pressed my hands over my face. The chamomile tea I'd had that morning rose in my throat. This wasn't just a scheme anymore. This was identity fraud. This was forgery. This was my husband and his mother committing actual crimes to steal my grandmother's home. That first night at Jess's, I didn't sleep. Not a minute. I lay on the air mattress with Biscuit curled against me and stared at the ceiling and listened to the hum of the tattoo parlor's neon sign through the window. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Karen's face, that warm, terrible smile at the dining room table. Ashley, honey, sit. The next 3 days were the worst of my life. Linda filed the emergency motion, but the court couldn't schedule a hearing for 10 days. 10 days during which, legally, the deed stood. 10 days during which Karen Holloway's name was on my grandmother's condo. Brandon called me 47 times. I counted. He left voicemails that swung wildly between fury and pleading. Where are you? Why did you take the dog? Then, hours later, Ash, baby, please come home. We can talk about this. Whatever you think happened, it's not what you think. Then, the next morning, cold and clipped. My attorney says you abandoning the marital home could affect the divorce proceedings. Just so you know. Divorce. He'd said the word before I had. Which meant he'd already been planning for it. Which meant this was never about protecting us or building something together. This was an exit strategy. Take the condo, transfer it to his mother where I couldn't touch it in a divorce settlement, and walk away. I stopped eating. Not on purpose. My body just refused food. Jess would put a plate in front of me and I'd stare at it until it went cold. I lost 7 pounds in 5 days. My hands developed a tremor that made it hard to type at work. My supervisor, a kind woman named Deborah, pulled me aside on Thursday and asked if everything was okay. I said yes. She didn't believe me, but let it go. On the 6th night at Jess's apartment, I broke. Completely. I was in the shower, hot water running over me, and I just slid down the tile wall and sat on the floor of the tub and sobbed. Not crying, sobbing. The kind that comes from somewhere below your ribs. The kind that makes you feel like your body is trying to turn itself inside out. Biscuit scratched at the bathroom door, whining. I had done everything right. I had been careful. I had protected my trust, refused to sign, hired an attorney, and they had stolen it anyway. They had forged my name and taken what my grandmother left me. The woman who taught me to read, who made me sweet potato pie every Thanksgiving, who told me on her deathbed, "That condo is your foundation, baby. Don't you ever let anyone shake it." And I had let them shake it. The next morning, day 7, I was sitting in Jess's kitchen, hollow-eyed, nursing coffee I couldn't taste, when my phone rang. Not Brandon, not Linda. An unknown 704 number. Mrs. Holloway, this is Patricia Gomez. I'm a notary public here in Charlotte. I got your number from the Mecklenburg County Clerk's office. I set my coffee down. Okay. I need to tell you something, and I probably should have called sooner, but I wasn't sure. Look, a man came into my office 12 days ago, said his name was Brandon Holloway. He had a woman with him, he said was his wife. She presented a North Carolina driver's license with your name on it. My heart stopped. Actually stopped, for 1 beat, maybe 2. The woman signed a quitclaim deed and a general power of attorney. But ma'am, I've been doing this 23 years, and something felt wrong. The woman seemed nervous. She kept looking at the man before she signed. And the license? The photo looked off. Similar, but off. Why are you calling me now? I asked. Because yesterday I got a call from an attorney named Linda Huang asking me to verify the notarization. And when she described you, your age, your appearance, I realized the woman in my office wasn't you. She was older, blonde where you're brunette, according to Ms. Huang. Ma'am, I think I notarized a forged signature. I grabbed the counter. The kitchen tilted. Will you testify to that? Patricia Gomez paused. I could lose my commission, my livelihood. They committed fraud using your stamp. If it comes out and you stayed silent... I know. Another pause. Yes, I'll testify. I'll submit a sworn affidavit. I already called my own attorney this morning. I should have caught it and I didn't, and I'm not going to compound that by staying quiet. I hung up and called Linda with shaking hands. She answered on the first ring. Linda, the notary just called me. She's willing to testify. Karen impersonated me at the signing. She used a fake ID. The notary will swear to it. Linda was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then she said, Ashley, we're not just voiding this transfer. We're pressing criminal charges. Forgery, identity fraud, and conspiracy. Against both of them. Something shifted in my chest. Something that had been curled up and dying for 7 days lifted its head and opened its eyes. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something harder, colder, sharper. It was purpose. There's more, Linda continued. I pulled the power of attorney they filed alongside the quitclaim deed. Brandon signed it too, as your authorized agent. But here's what his lawyer apparently didn't catch, or what Brandon didn't read before he signed. The POA they filed? It's not the one Kessler drafted. Someone, probably Karen, swapped the documents. The power of attorney Brandon signed doesn't give him authority over your assets. It gives you full authority over his bank accounts, his 401k, his share of the marital property, everything. I blinked. What? Karen must have gotten confused with the paperwork, or she printed the wrong version, or she's not as smart as she thinks she is. Either way, Brandon walked into that notary's office and signed a document giving you complete financial power of attorney over him. And it's been filed. It's notarized. It's legal. I sat in Jess's kitchen, the morning light coming through the window, Biscuit's warm body against my feet, and I started to laugh. Not a happy laugh, something raw and jagged and half hysterical. Jess came running out of her bedroom in her pajamas, eyes wide. What? What happened? I looked at her. Brandon signed a power of attorney giving me control over everything he owns, and he doesn't know it yet. Jess stared at me. Then she sat down across the table, very slowly, and said, Tell me everything. That afternoon, Linda and I sat in her office and built our strategy. The hearing was in 3 days. We had Patricia Gomez's affidavit. We had my photographs of the original documents from Brandon's bag. We had bank records, trust documents, and a notarized power of attorney that Brandon had signed with his own hand, one that turned his entire scheme inside out. Linda looked at me over her reading glasses. When this hearing happens, Brandon is going to find out what he actually signed. His attorney is going to find out. And if I know Karen, she's going to be on that speakerphone the second they leave the courtroom. Good, I said. Ashley, I need to ask you something. What do you want here? The condo back, obviously. The marriage is over, I'm assuming. But how far do you want to take this? I thought about Nana Ruth's hands, how they felt when she held mine, papery and warm. I thought about her voice. Don't you ever let anyone shake it. All the way, I said. Criminal charges, full divorce. And Linda, I want him to know exactly what he signed before anyone else tells him. I want to be there when he reads it. Linda nodded slowly. Then we're going to need one more thing. She picked up her phone. I know a forensic document examiner who can verify the signature forgery within 48 hours. Once we have that report, Brandon and Karen aren't just losing the condo. They're looking at felony charges. I drove back to Jess's apartment that evening with the windows down, October air rushing through the car. Biscuit had his head out the passenger window, ears flapping. For the first time in 7 days, I was hungry, actually hungry. I stopped at a drive-thru and ate a burger in the parking lot and cried. Not from sadness this time, but from something I couldn't quite name. Relief, maybe, or the feeling of finally moving forward instead of bracing for the next blow. 3 days. In 3 days, I would walk into that courtroom, and Brandon would learn that the trap he'd built had closed around his own ankle. The morning of the hearing, I put on the same navy blazer I'd worn to Kessler and Brandt's office. I clipped Nana Ruth's pearl earrings into place and looked at myself in the mirror above Jess's bathroom sink. My face was thinner, those 7 pounds showed, and there were shadows under my eyes that no concealer could fix. But my hands were steady. For the first time in weeks, my hands were completely steady. Jess drove me downtown. Biscuit stayed at her apartment with a puzzle toy and a peanut butter Kong. Linda met us on the courthouse steps at 8:45, her briefcase in one hand, a manila folder thick with exhibits in the other. Patricia Gomez is already inside, Linda said. The forensic document examiner submitted his report last night. The signature on the quitclaim deed is not yours. It's not even a good forgery. Different pen pressure, different letter spacing, different slant. He'll testify to that if needed, but I don't think we'll need him today. Is Brandon here? I asked. His attorney filed an appearance 20 minutes ago, David Kessler. They're in the hallway outside courtroom 4B. I walked through those courthouse doors and down the marble corridor with Linda on my left and Jess 3 steps behind. And there he was, Brandon, in a charcoal suit I'd helped him pick out at Nordstrom last spring, standing against the wall with his arms crossed. Kessler stood beside him, reviewing papers. Karen was nowhere in sight, which surprised me until Linda leaned over and whispered, "She's on the witness list. She's probably in the waiting area." Brandon saw me, our eyes locked. His expression cycled through 3 things in rapid succession: surprise, guilt, and then something hard and defiant. He straightened up, squared his shoulders, set his jaw. I walked right past him without a word. The hearing was before Judge Margaret Thornton, a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s who had a reputation for cutting through theatrics. Linda had told me that was a good thing for us. Kessler spoke first. He framed the transfer as a marital estate planning decision that both parties had discussed extensively. He referenced the appointment at his office, the conversations about leveraging equity, the mutual desire to consolidate assets. Judge Thornton listened. Then she turned to Linda. Linda stood up and laid it out like a surgeon opening a chest cavity. The forged quitclaim deed, the fake ID Karen had used. Patricia Gomez's sworn affidavit describing the woman who'd appeared in her office, blonde, older, nervous, looking at Brandon before every signature. The forensic examiner's report confirming the signature wasn't mine. My photographs of the original draft documents from Brandon's bag, time-stamped weeks before the deed was filed. Then Linda called Patricia Gomez to the stand. Patricia was a small woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain around her neck and the bearing of someone who'd spent 2 decades verifying other people's most important moments. She was visibly nervous, but her voice was clear. The woman who appeared in my office on October 3rd presented a North Carolina driver's license bearing the name Ashley Holloway, Patricia said. She signed the documents in front of me. But when I was later contacted by Ms. Huang and shown a photograph of the real Ashley Holloway, I immediately recognized that the woman in my office was not the same person. The woman who signed was older, had blonde hair, and a different facial structure. Did the man who accompanied her, Brandon Holloway, identify this woman as his wife? Linda asked. Yes, he introduced her as my wife, Ashley. I looked at Brandon. He was staring at the table in front of him, both hands flat on the surface. His attorney was writing something furiously on a legal pad. Linda entered the forensic report into evidence. Then she turned to the judge and said, "Your Honor, there's one additional matter. On the same date, Mr. Holloway signed a general power of attorney that was filed alongside the fraudulent quitclaim deed. However, the document Mr. Holloway signed does not grant him authority over Mrs. Holloway's assets. It grants Mrs. Holloway full financial power of attorney over Mr. Holloway's assets, including bank accounts, retirement accounts, and his interest in marital property. The courtroom went very quiet. Judge Thornton looked over her glasses. Mr. Kessler, was your client aware of the contents of the power of attorney he signed? Kessler turned to Brandon. Brandon's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His face had gone the color of old paper, exactly the shade I would see again on the kitchen floor. He looked at his attorney with the desperate, drowning expression of a man who has just realized the ground beneath him is not ground at all. Your Honor, I'd like to request a brief recess to confer with my client, Kessler said, his voice tight. Denied, Judge Thornton said. I've heard enough. The quitclaim deed filed on October 3rd is void. It was executed through forgery and identity fraud. The property in question, Unit 1407, 401 South Tryon Street, remains in the revocable trust of Ashley Holloway as sole trustee and beneficiary. I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. She looked directly at Brandon. Mr. Holloway, I strongly suggest you retain criminal defense counsel. Today. The gavel came down, and that was it. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I stood. Jess grabbed my arm from the gallery and squeezed. Linda was already packing her briefcase, her expression professionally neutral, but I caught the smallest flicker of satisfaction at the corner of her mouth. Brandon hadn't moved. He was still sitting at the respondent's table, staring at the documents in front of him. Kessler was speaking to him in a low, urgent voice, but Brandon wasn't listening. He was reading the power of attorney, the real one, the one he'd actually signed, for what I am certain was the first time. I walked toward the exit. As I passed his table, I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe I needed him to look at me. Maybe I needed to see it in his face, the full recognition of what he'd done and what it had cost him. Brandon. He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and glassy. My grandmother told me once that a condo is just walls and windows, I said. But a foundation, a real foundation, is something no one can forge. He opened his mouth, closed it. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. In the hallway, Karen was sitting on a wooden bench outside the waiting area. She stood up when she saw me, and for one surreal moment, she looked like she was going to speak, to explain, to justify, to spin one more version of the story where she was the victim. But Linda stepped between us, held up her hand, and said, Ms. Holloway, any communication with my client should go through me, and you should know that a criminal referral has been made. I'd advise you to speak to an attorney before you speak to anyone else. Karen's face crumbled, not into tears, into something uglier, rage, compressed and impotent. She looked past Linda at me, and her voice came out in a hiss. You think you've won? You've destroyed this family. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Jess took my arm, and we walked out into the October sunlight, and I breathed, really breathed, for the first time in weeks. The criminal investigation moved faster than I expected. Patricia Gomez's testimony and the forensic report gave the DA's office everything they needed. Karen was charged with forgery, identity fraud, and conspiracy. Brandon was charged with conspiracy and filing a fraudulent instrument. Karen's bail was set at $25,000, Brandon's at $15,000. Karen's apartment in Ballantyne, the one she'd supposedly found on her own, turned out to be funded entirely by Brandon. He'd been wiring her $1,800 a month from his checking account, money that should have been going toward our shared expenses, money I'd never known about. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. North Carolina requires a year of separation, but Linda filed immediately and used the criminal charges, the financial deception, and Brandon's diversion of marital funds to negotiate a settlement that left him with very little. His 401k, which held about $87,000, was split equitably, but the judge awarded me a larger share of the marital assets as compensation for the fraud. Brandon kept his truck and his clothes. I kept the house contents, biscuit, and every shred of my dignity. The power of attorney he'd signed, I never used it. Linda advised me that exercising it could complicate the criminal case and muddy the moral high ground. She was right, but I kept a copy of it, framed on my desk at home, not as a trophy, as a reminder. Karen pleaded no contest to the forgery charge. She received 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a restitution order for my legal fees, $14,300. Brandon pleaded guilty to filing a fraudulent instrument, a misdemeanor reduced from the original felony in exchange for cooperation. He got probation and a fine. His sales manager position quietly disappeared 2 months later. Last I heard, he'd moved back to Tucson. I moved back into Nana Ruth's condo on a Saturday in March. Jess helped me carry boxes. Biscuit raced through the empty rooms, his nails clicking on the hardwood, his tail going wild. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows on the 14th floor and looked out at the Charlotte skyline, the same view my grandmother had looked at for 20 years, and I pressed my forehead against the glass and let myself cry. Not from sadness, not from relief, from gratitude. For a woman who had the foresight to build a foundation so strong that 2 people with a lawyer, a notary, and a forged signature still couldn't crack it. That was a year ago. I'm 35 now. I still work in mortgages. I still read every line of every document that crosses my desk, and I still tell every client the same thing. Read before you sign. Understand what you're agreeing to, because the person sitting across from you might not have your best interests at heart, even if they say, "I love you," while they hand you the pen. Biscuit is asleep at my feet as I write this. The condo is quiet. The rent I used to collect is now my living space, and I've never felt less alone in it. Jess comes over on Thursdays for wine and bad reality TV. Linda sends me a Christmas card every year with a handwritten note that just says, "Still proud of you." And sometimes, late at night, when the city lights are glittering through those floor-to-ceiling windows, I think about that sound, the hollow, wet thud of Brandon's knees hitting the kitchen floor. He'd called Karen right after the hearing, speakerphone on, pacing our old rental house. "Mom, I got it all done with the notary. The downtown condo is in your name now. Tomorrow we'll come with the sheriff and kick her out." That's what he'd believed right up until the courtroom. That's the victory speech he'd been rehearsing. And then he read the power of attorney, the real one, and the floor came up to meet him. I don't feel sorry for him. I tried to for a while, because I loved him once, and love leaves grooves in you that take a long time to smooth out. But then I remember Karen's voice. She didn't earn it. It just fell in her lap, and the pity evaporates like water on a hot pan. Nana Ruth earned it. She worked 31 years at Duke Energy, saved every spare dollar, and bought that condo with cash. She earned it, and she gave it to me not because it fell in my lap, but because she trusted me to protect it. I did, Nana. I kept the foundation. Nobody shook it.